Hey guys, Dan here with this week's movie reviews, and boy, after a few lackluster weeks of new movies on demand, this past week we've had several big ones come out. You've got Artemis Fowl over on Disney Plus, which was supposed to be released in theaters in 2019, got bumped till this year. I think it was supposed to come out in May, and then obviously theaters are closed, so it didn't. So that is now streaming for free on Disney Plus. You've got The Five Bloods, which is a brand new Spike Lee movie, meant for, I guess, theaters as well, and then it was going to go on to Netflix shortly after, but Netflix just put it up right away. And the Pete Davidson, Judd Apatow movie, The King of Staten Island, and that's what we're going to start with this week. We do also have a fourth movie in the mix. I always try to find an under-the-radar fourth movie, and this week it's Becky, a horror sort of movie, I guess, a gore movie, and that stars Kevin James as a neo-Nazi. So that is an interesting one that we will get to for our final film. But first up, we're going to talk about The King of Staten Island, and I think this would have been a pretty huge movie if it were released theatrically. We don't get a ton of big comedies at the box office anymore. And the name Judd Apatow, though, certainly helps bring an audience in. And this was supposed to be in theaters a couple weeks ago. And, of course, with everything, they decided instead of postponing it and moving it, to later this year or 2021, just, put it up for rent on Amazon and all the other streaming services. And you can get this for $19.99 rental on Amazon Prime and a lot of those other places. So let's talk about this one first. Pete Davidson, I just reviewed him in Big Time Adolescence a couple of weeks ago, which was a Hulu original movie with surprising results. I really liked it. And here, this one hits even more close to Pete Davidson's personal life. It's being touted as a semi-autobiographical film. If you don't know, Pete Davidson's dad died in 9/11 when he was very young, and in this movie, his character, what's his name? I'm so bad with names. Scott. In this movie, the character Scott lost his firefighter dad to a big hotel fire when he was 7. So, similar circumstances there. And I think just the, obviously this guy in the movie doesn't go on to be on Saturday Night Live or a comedian or anything like that, but I think a lot of the emotional beats that are taken in this movie of, being raised with just the single mom and the sister, and the mom looking for, a new lover, a new husband, and the emotional toll of that process on the kids and all of that. So a lot of that stuff plays into focus here. His mother is played by Marissa Tomei. The sister is played by Maud Apatow, who, yes, is one of Judd's daughters. She was featured in This Is Us and Knocked Up with her actual mom, Leslie Mann, who is married to Judd Apatow. So, and I just reviewed her in a recent series as well on my TV review show. What show was that? Oh yeah, Hollywood. She's in Hollywood on Netflix. She's also in Euphoria too, which I have not seen. But so she's sort of branching out a little bit from the Judd Apatow thumb. But anyway, at this point in the movie, Scott is 24 years old. His sister is just about to graduate high school, so she's going to be out on her own. But Scott still lives with his mom. He dropped out of high school through a lot of issues he was having emotionally, of course. Being raised by the single mother and all of this stuff. But he's also got some mental issues, which that, leads into Pete Davidson's real personality as well. And here he's also got some medical issues like Crohn's disease. And so there you go. So you also have Belle Powley playing Kelsey, who is, I guess, an on-again, off-again girlfriend, you could say, but certainly his girlfriend at the beginning of the movie. And then the other main star is Bill Burr as Ray Bishop, who is essentially a firefighter that ends up courting Scott's mother after a big dust-up where Scott tried to tattoo Ray's young son, who was about, 7 or 8 himself. And so he ends up sort of being a father-type figure to Ray's kids, because Ray is going through divorce, or maybe he's already divorced, I don't remember. But anyway, the movie basically takes us on Scott's journey as this 20-something person who still lives at home, high school dropout, wants to be a tattoo artist, but really can't get his life together. All he does is hang out with his buddies, smoke a lot of weed, be kind of in an Arrested Development type of way, and his mom doesn't really know what to do with him, because she loves him and, wants to support him, but at the same time, she's like, okay, this guy needs to, basically crap or get off the pot. So that's the gist of the movie. So let's talk about how well it does at all of those goals. I think, like a lot of Judd Apatow movies, this film is too long. Most of his movies are over 2 hours, and for a comedy, it doesn't need to be. Like, Knocked Up is one of my favorite comedies of the last 20 years. There's no doubt about it. But even that, I think, you could have trimmed 10 or 15 minutes off and not lost a step. So here you get that sort of same result. It's, 217 maybe? 136. So an hour and 16 minutes. It's a little too long, I think. But that being said, like a lot of the great Apatow movies, like This Is 40 and Knocked Up, it really has this huge emotional weight to it. I think this one, more than either of those, because of the the setup of the Scott character. He's got a lot of issues in his life, and I think it kind of does mirror Pete Davidson's life in the respect that, look, he's been very vocal about his mental health issues. There's been some, suicide attempts and this and that. Personally, I think Pete Davidson is not that charismatic an actor. We've talked about this when I did Big Time Adolescence. He just doesn't hit it for me in that regard. And thus far, he's only really been playing himself. He was himself in Big Time Adolescence. He's himself here. He gets a little bit more to do in Saturday Night Live, but even then, compared to a lot of the people on SNL, his stuff is pretty routine. He plays the dumb guy, he plays the simpleton, he plays the shy school kid, whatever. He doesn't really do a lot of impressions, So this, I guess, is meant to be his big foray into leading man status. He co-wrote the script as well, so maybe there's some writing in his future. But to be honest, it was fine for this movie. It worked out great for this movie, but it's like saying Eminem's a great actor because he did 8 Mile. A lot of people actually are upset about Beyonce doing Black Panther 2, which was just announced recently. And, my whole point to that was, she really can't act that. I mean, she could do Austin Powers and Pink Panther and stuff, but, one of my friends was like, oh, well, she was great in Dreamgirls. Oh, yeah, she was great in the movie where she had to play a gal that led this amazing girl group that wanted to go solo. Yeah, she did. That was a real stretch for her. And that's my point with Pete Davidson. He is great in this movie. I can't deny that. But it doesn't stretch any of his abilities, really. So, once he gets out into other things, I know he has a role in Suicide Squad 2, it will be very interesting to see what that's like. Because, he did a real good job here, but he's playing himself. I think the real revelation in this movie is Bill Burr, to be completely honest. I've seen Bill Burr do several things. His stand-up, of course. He's also, had some supporting roles on different sitcoms and guest roles and stuff. But here, he really is not part of the comedic thread of this movie. He really is more of the dramatic side, and really a large portion of the dramatic side. There's some emotional moments with a lot of the main characters, but he's pretty much, from the word go, sort of a no-nonsense, dramatic role. He does get a few laughs, but he's the one, I think, really stretching his acting abilities here. And the storyline between both him and Marissa Tomei and him and Pete Davidson's character I think are what make the movie really happen. Like, without Bill Burr and the Ray character, I don't think you have a very engaging movie, to be honest. So he's the real revelation here. Marissa Tomei is always great, so I don't need to talk about her. I mean, I haven't seen her give a bad performance maybe ever. I mean, probably since the first season of A Different World, where she co-starred as, the white one. But, ever since My Cousin Vinny and all of these early movies of hers, she's been outstanding, especially these last, I would say, 10 years, like since The Wrestler and playing Aunt May, and, she is, and doing Edith Bunker on the Norman Lear live shows. She's great. And she carries that over here as well. So that's no surprise. But I think it's too long, but emotionally it definitely hits a lot of what it's going for. I definitely laughed a few times. And the soundtrack is very, very unique. It's pretty much a thread of a lot of like recent hip-hop and stuff that Pete Davidson himself is listening to, but woven throughout is a lot of these like classic 60s and 70s songs that are more upraised speed, and there's a great bonding scene, which includes a Wallflower song at the bar that really, I think, encapsulates the nature of this whole movie. And I guess they showed that in the trailer. I was kind of looking up some things about the soundtrack, and I don't watch trailers, so I've seen like a couple of the 30-second trailers for this on Hulu and stuff, but I never watched the full 2.5-minute trailer for this. But I guess the Wallflower song plays prominently in there, so hopefully I'm not giving anything away there. But I liked this movie, but it's definitely not without its flaws. I think it is definitely more of the middling Apatow. It's not nearly as good as Knocked Up, and it's probably on par or maybe a little below This Is 40, but it's about on that level of like the Amy Schumer movie, I Feel Pretty. One of the best things about that movie was the length. For a Judd Apatow movie, it was only like an hour and 50 minutes or something. This is certainly deeper than that movie in many respects, but I don't think it will bring Pete Davidson leading man status, but I will leave The King of Staten Island with a B. So let's move on here. Up next, we're going to talk about the new Spike Lee movie. I think Artemis Fowl probably is more high profile, but I think the Spike Lee movie is going to be more important in the long run. I think it will be up for some awards come Oscar season. And I think with everything going on right now with Black Lives Matter, and I just watched Spike Lee in like a mini biography on Apple TV Plus that I talked about last week on my TV reviews. So let's talk about The Five Bloods. This is on Netflix for streaming right now, bypassing theaters like a lot of these movies are. And of course, like most Spike Lee movies, it was co-written by Spike as well. And essentially, what happened was Spike Lee got a hold of this script a few years ago and kind of rewrote it. It was written in 2013, and Spike kind of put his stamp on it then a couple years later. And really, this is the kind of movie that, much like BlacKkKlansman, which is a better picture for sure than this, these are the kind of movies that really Spike Lee is the only person that can make. They're basically big budget versions of the things he was making in the 80s. And yeah, I mean, anybody could make this sort of a movie, but without Spike's stamp on it, it doesn't have A, the budget, and this movie does need a budget, and B, the social consciousness of it. So it really, gets the word out about these movies that it's got Spike Lee attached to it. But essentially, this movie is about a group of Vietnam vets who lost their leader in action back in the day, played by Chadwick Boseman in some flashbacks, and they return to the scene of where he was basically killed to find the remains of their leader, and as well to find some gold bars that they had hid there as well while they were serving. And the guys at the helm are Delroy Lindo. He's basically the star of the movie. He plays Paul, kind of the de facto leader of the group now that the Boseman character has passed away. Storm and Norman, as they called him. And you've also got Jonathan Majors here as David. He is the son of Paul, and he kind of tags along. And then the rest of the crew from the war itself. Clark Peters, Norm Lewis, and Isaiah Whitlock Jr. Play these guys. And, you may not know their names, but, like, for example, Whitlock was on The Wire, so, you may have seen him before. Norm Lewis has done mostly Broadway stuff, but I recognize him from kind of popping up in things. But really, it's mostly Lindo's show, for sure. And this movie is very frustrating because it doesn't really seem to know what it is. Usually Spike Lee has a singular vision, and so it kind of makes sense that this movie had some overhaul from original script to Spike Lee taking over, because it definitely is a lot of different things at once. About halfway through, and this is another long one. This is what, 2:35 maybe. 1:54. I'm a minute off every time. This one is 2 hours and 34 minutes, so it is long. But about halfway through, it shifts gears entirely and becomes this whole other thing. Now, through it all, you do kind of see Lindo's character's descent into madness, so that is sort of a common thread, but the entire tone of the movie shifts about halfway through, and we're introduced to a handful of new characters, and there's a lot in the spoiler territory with that, so I don't want to give anything away. I will say that Paul Walter Hauser is here as well, and he was in BlacKkKlansman, but you may know him best as the title character in Richard Jewell, and boy, he's getting to be one of my least favorite go-to actors. He was one of the guys in I, Tonya as well, I think, like Tanya's brother or something. He always basically plays, a fat, dumb loser. And that's what he is here. I really am tiring of that character on him. I'd like to see if we can stretch his acting ability. I think he did in BlacKkKlansman. Like, I feel like in BlacKkKlansman, it's been about 2 years since I've seen it, but I feel like in BlacKkKlansman he was someone very different, and he was, I think, more front and center too. I mean, here he's a little bit in the background, and he doesn't show up till halfway through the movie. But that's just one of many nitpicks I have about this movie. I want to like this movie a lot, and in fact, I purposely saved it till the end of all four of these movies because I was like, it's probably going to be the best one. I'm going to watch it on Juneteenth. I'm going to feel the Spike Lee love on Juneteenth, and it just did not hit the way I wanted it to. It's too all over the place. It doesn't know if it wants to be, like a war satire, a heavy-hitting drama, a father-son story, a thriller. It's got too many moving parts, and I don't know if that's due to the length or due to Spike not knowing exactly what he wants to say. I'll admit, I have not seen more than probably 5 Spike Lee movies. I've seen Inside Man, I've seen Jungle Fever, I saw BlacKkKlansman, obviously, I saw his remake of Old Boy, and I think maybe there's one more in there that I've seen all the way through. I've seen like parts of Do the Right Thing, and I've seen parts of one of the other 90s ones. It might be Mo Better Blues, but I've never even seen Malcolm X, which I really need to do that. But point being, for the ones I've seen, this is probably the worst. And that's not to say it's a negative grade, because it's not. It's more just disappointing. I really wanted more out of this. But that being said, Lindo is assured an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. There's no doubt in my mind about this. I think even if this wasn't a, Black Lives Matter kind of year, this performance, and look, I've loved this guy for years. I watched The Good Fight, and I know he just recently left that show, but, he's one of my favorite characters on that show, and he's done a lot of things with Spike Lee, but a lot of other things over the years, and he's always very good, but he's not usually front and center. He's usually sort of in the background, more supporting, and he's always got, a command, but sometimes his characters aren't written that well because he's supporting or whatever. But here, he is certainly a complex character, and I really liked what they did with him in the first half of the movie. The second half, where it really goes off the rails, not so much. But I think he's a lock for a Best Actor nomination, if nothing else. And I think from the goodwill that BlacKkKlansman has given Spike Lee, I think he could maybe end up with a Best Director nod out of this, and maybe a Best Picture nod. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because it's still so early in the year. But obviously, the Academy is going to be looking at influential black voices this year more than any other, I would think. And I think Spike Lee is always at the forefront of that. I just wish this was a better movie overall. So, like King of Staten Island, I will leave To Five Bloods with a B. So up next, we're going to talk about Artemis Fowl. This is on Disney Plus, streaming for free, and it's based on the first 2 books in a wildly popular book series that I have never heard of. It was out in the early 2000s, so I was already out of college at this point, but people that are 10 years or so younger than me are apparently very attached to this book series and love it, so there you go. And in fact, shortly after the first book came out, Miramax had purchased it for a possible film option. Didn't happen, went through some development hell for many years, and Disney acquired the rights in 2013. And at some point, Disney owned Miramax too, so I'm not sure why they didn't always have the rights, but whatever. But Kenneth Branagh directs this movie, and it essentially stars, let's see, what was the name of the kid? Ferdia Shaw stars as Artemis Fowl II, who is 12 years old and basically a criminal mastermind. Very, very, very smart, genius kid. And we also have Josh Gad here as an imprisoned dwarf thief. And he's sort of the narrator. We see him right at the start in all his grizzledness. And I'll talk about Josh Gad in a minute. I always have many thoughts about Josh Gad. But Colin Farrell plays the elder Artemis Fowl as well. He is also a criminal mastermind. And then Judi Dench is here too as Commander Julius Root, who is a commanding officer. And God, she is really making some interesting choices lately, you could say, between this and Cats. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. But anyway, it takes place in Ireland, and in Fowl Manor, which is where they live, of course, the Fowl family. A stolen collection of relics is linked to Mr. Artemis Fowl, played by Colin Farrell. And so we find out sort of, what's going on with him and how we got to this point, and why Mitch is imprisoned, the Josh Gad character, and all of this. So, look, before going into this, I didn't really know... Well, I didn't know anything about Artemis Fowl until we got the poster at my movie theater, and I was like, oh, Walt Disney's Artemis Fowl, what is this? I didn't know about the books, I didn't know about they were making a movie, I didn't know anything. But, look, I always give Disney family films a chance, whether they be very, very disappointing, like Wrinkle in Time, or, Tomorrowland is fairly disappointing, or, whether they're great, like... I don't know, the remakes, Beauty and the Beast, I guess, and The Jungle Book. But point being, they have. All right, now I have to think of a really good original Disney movie that's live action from the last few years. Boy, oh boy! I mean, they make some good cartoons. All right, well, I may have to get back to you on that. That's. I mean, yeah, Tron wasn't that good. Nutcracker in the Four Realms was not that good. Christopher Robin wasn't even that good. All right, well, I don't know. You got me. They're in a drought of good movies for live action. But anyway, this movie is a hot mess, like in every sense of the word. What I knew about it before I watched it was that it got slammed by the critics, and it's, I think, currently only at like a 10% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think that might be a wee bit harsh, but honestly, it's probably right there in that mix. I didn't really understand what was happening in half of this movie. I will just say it. And I think part of the problem is it takes 2 books and crams all of it into a short movie. Like if the Apatow movie and the Judd Apatow and the Spike Lee movies were too long, this is too short. Although I can't say I wanted more of it, but at least it might have fleshed some things out. It's about 90 minutes, and it's a mess. First of all, this kid Shaw, what's his first name? Ferdia. Interesting name, Ferdia Shaw. Look, he he's a cute kid. I'm sure he's good at like acting in commercials and stuff, but like he can't carry a movie. He really can't. He's not charismatic enough. And I watch a lot of movies, that are aimed for families and kids, and with kids as the lead. Like when I compare this to The Little Kid and Timmy Failure on Disney Plus, I mean, it's no contest. That kid has charisma to spare. He's funny. This kid is like so bland, so boring. I didn't care about him. I didn't care about his plight. Now Colin Farrell. Okay, wait. I'll tell you what. Speaking of Colin Farrell, there's a great live action Disney movie of late. It was probably about 4 or 5 years old by this point, but Saving Mr. Banks, starring Tom Hanks. That was, and actually, their Mary Poppins Returns was also great. But again, these are from properties they've already done. Like they did Mary Poppins originally, and that's sort of what begat both of those movies, Saving Mr. Banks and Mary Poppins Returns. So it's like, okay, those were both very, very, very good movies. I can't deny that. But at the same time, they're sort of based on previous Disney stuff. Artemis Fowl is new, and boy, oh boy, it suffers from it. Also, Kenneth Branagh, I like his directing in many things, but boy, this wasn't one of them. I don't think he really captured the imagination of what I imagine was the appeal of these books. The CGI was okay. I mean, it was a $150 million production, but it was like all for nothing. Like, it was sort of interesting to look at here or there, but I didn't know what was going on half the time, so it didn't much matter. They crammed so much into this little time, and oddly enough, one of the best things about this movie is Josh Gad. I go so back and forth on him, and I talk about it all the time because he's in 8 different things every year. I just talked about him the other week because he does a voice on Central Park, the new Apple TV Plus show, and he's very annoying in that. I think it's more the singing Josh Gad I don't care for, except for Beauty and the Beast. But boy, he was the best part of the story. Although, as the narrator, even he left me wondering, like, okay, what's going on here? This movie's a mess. The acting, not good. The story is okay, but very, very convoluted. The direction, I think, doesn't really get the point of why these books were so popular. Of course, Colin Farrell is great. I've really come around on him in the last few years. And Judi Dench, once again, looks like she did in Cats. Like, dear Lord, get me out of here. Like, this woman is a dame, a great actress. We've seen her do so many good movies. Why is she just taking any old script that comes along? Like, this is rough for her. This movie's a mess. And it's boring. For only a 90-minute kids, like, action type movie, it's boring. But that being said, I'm not going to fail it. It wasn't as horrible as I think some people are claiming it is. But I also have no attachment to the books. Maybe if I read the books and was into them, I would have a much different, even vitriolic, experience with this film. But I didn't. To me, it was just very, very boring, below average. They needed to get a better kid in the mix for sure, acting wise. So I leave Artemis Fowl with a D+. All right, and finally we've got Becky. This is an action thriller movie starring Lulu Wilson, who I was not super familiar with, but I kind of recognized her when I saw her. And I've seen a lot of the horror type movies she's appeared in, including Ouija Origin of Evil, which was far better than the first Ouija, and then Annabelle Creation from a few years ago, and then she was also in The Haunting of Hill House. So she is set on the horror stuff, and this falls sort of in line with that. It's not a traditional horror movie, but it's a horror gore movie, I would say, which is to say it's more like Green Room or Green Inferno or some of those. It takes its horror from being very visceral, very disgusting, and sort of goes with that. And Green Room specifically is a great comparison because the villains in this, led by Kevin James in a bald cap, or maybe he really went bald, and sporting a very thick beard, is a white supremacist, a neo-Nazi. much like Patrick Stewart was in Green Room. So, I mean, that's the easiest comparison. But essentially, Lulu Wilson plays Becky, who is reeling from her mom's death, and her dad is played by Joel McHale, and he is bringing her to a dinner to unveil to her, hey, you're going to have a new stepmom and a new stepbrother. You know, this is what we're doing here. And Becky's in high school, so, you know, it's not like she's, you know, old enough to be out on her own. So she sort of takes the lead, though, here and says, well, F this, you know, I don't want her to be my stepmom. Like, how dare you, Dad? How dare you, Joel McHale? You know, I don't want any of this. And then shortly after that, we see Kevin James and his cronies coming in, the neo-Nazis, and basically trying to uncover this hidden key that Becky had discovered. And so to get this key, they basically, you know, have to try and kill the family to get there. This is a movie like a lot of the ones I mentioned. You know, it is definitely gory. It's definitely, you know, there's a lot of, I'm like eye averse. Like, I hate eye stuff. And there's one scene where, I mean, she literally just gets Kevin James's eyeball out of his socket. And you see it, you know, and I mean, I had to turn away for a couple of the scenes for sure. Luckily, he covers up he like bandages his face so you can't see the hole where his eye would be. But Kevin James is actually pretty good in this, you know. When I heard Kevin James, you know, goes hardcore as a neo-Nazi in this, you know, drama, thriller, whatever, I just sort of thought that could go one of two ways, you know, and it actually went the way of good. I think he's actually pretty believable here. You know, it helps that he hasn't had a funny movie or TV show in about 10 years, so you can easily believe that he's an unfunny person. But it's not as good as his buddy Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems, of course. But, you know, look, for a Kevin James non-comedic movie, he actually does a pretty good job. But really, Wilson is the star here. She proves time and again in these horror movies that this is kind of the style that she was made for. And she's just kicking everybody's ass. You know, it's a lot of revenge here for things that go down throughout the movie. And she handles it very, very expertly and deftly. And there's some dog stuff here, too. If you're squeamish about violence against dogs, probably stay away from this movie. But if you like Green Room, this is sort of the B version of it. I mean, you know, Green Room was really, I mean, it was an outstanding picture in this field, you know, the horror, gore kind of thing. So it's definitely not as good as Green Room, but it's not bad. I mean, it's serviceable for what it is. It just doesn't really bring anything new to the table. There's some, you know, interesting things, you know, death-wise that happen in it. You know, the relationship between Becky and her family. We've seen pretty much everything in this movie done before to varying degrees. I mean, I don't know that we've ever... I mean, I don't watch a lot of eyeball violent movies, but, you know, I'm sure at some point we've seen somebody's eyeball come out of their socket and sort of land on the table. So, you know, I think there's nothing new to this movie except for maybe the revelation that Kevin James can actually be a pretty decent bad guy. But other than that, it was enjoyable, though. I was surprised at how much I like it. And this is another one that's pretty quick, like Artemis Fowl. You know, I don't think it's even 90 minutes, is it? A little longer, okay, 100 minutes. So it's an hour and 40. But Joel McHale, I like when he does comedy. But the couple of times he's tried to do these real dramaticals, he was in a horror movie, I want to say in like 2016 or 17. It was either Deliver Us from Evil, I forget. But actually, Colin Farrell might have been in that too, speak of the devil. But anyway, it's hard not to sort of laugh because he's always so sarcastic. And he usually plays sort of that comic relief character. Here he's trying to play like no-nonsense dad. That one didn't take for me. But Lulu Wilson is great. And Kevin James is surprisingly good in this movie as well. So, you know, I enjoyed Becky. If you're looking for sort of some mindless throwaway stuff, at this point in time, if you don't mind a lot of gore, I think you can do worse. I'm going to leave Becky with a B-. So that's going to do it for the movie reviews. We've got TV reviews coming up in a couple of days. I'm going to be meeting with Joe this week, and we're going to do a Cinderella review. Speaking of Disney, we're going to get back to the classics, and we are indeed up to, I have it right here, we are indeed up to Cinderella in the mix for that, so I've got that. I think we're going to do some Food Fanatics reviews, too, when I go over and see Joe. So we've got some Food Fanatics coming up, too, and hopefully very soon we're going to start doing the Freaks and Geeks Friday reviews. Now that the Frasier reviews are over, we were looking for another show, and Joe has never seen Freaks and Geeks. It's one of my favorites, so we're going to attack that episode by episode, hopefully starting soon. So thank you so much for watching. I think there's going to be more movie reviews next week, too, because I feel like there's a few other new things coming out. I know Joseph Gordon-Levitt has a new movie that just dropped, and there might be a couple others out, too. So we'll get to all of that coming probably next week. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you back here next time. Bye.